This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com with your Sunday update for this 12th day of December 2010. And now, for the real news. The San Francisco Weekly reported last week on a DNA sample switch in a San Francisco Police Department crime lab that was covered up by the SFPD for 2 years. The sample switch was revealed by a whistleblower who wrote a letter to the Public Defender's Office and to the American Society of Lab Defenders detailing how the switch was brought to the attention of Matt Gabriel, the head of the DNA unit in the SFPD crime lab, who then ordered evidence of the switch erased by changing the labeling of the tubes in question and modifying the data in the computer system. At the moment, it is unclear which cases or even how many cases might have been affected by the switch because all of the original notes of the switch have been destroyed, although a homicide case is believed to have been involved. The case highlights some of the fears that civil liberty activists have had for years about the increasing use of DNA sampling in routine police work. In August of 2009, Israeli scientists reported how easy it could be to plant fake DNA evidence at the scene of a crime in order to frame someone up for that crime. As Tanya Saminchali of the ACLU remarked at that time, DNA is a lot easier to plant at a crime scene than fingerprints. We're creating a criminal justice system that is increasingly relying on this technology. Worryingly, DNA samples are not becoming more protected, but in fact more freely available, as the very governmental authorities who would be in the best position to deliberately frame the innocent for crimes that they did not commit are advocating the expansion of criminal DNA databases to include those who have not even committed a crime. President Obama called earlier this year for the creation of a national DNA database of people arrested for any crime whatsoever, regardless of whether that person is convicted.
I think that this is something this country has to deal with.
It's the right thing to do, and then, as you well know, John, this is where the national registry becomes so important, because what you have is individual states, they may have a database, but if they're not sharing it with the state next door, you've got a guy from Illinois driving over into Indiana, and they're not talking to each other. And so making sure that not only are we getting these DNA tests done state by state, but then nationally, everybody's talking to each other. That's how we make sure that we continue to tighten the grip around folks who have perpetrated these crimes.
Now, as residents of the US, Australia, Canada, and much of the Western world are only beginning to find out, the blood samples taken by hospitals of every newborn baby have been being stored in secret government DNA databases for decades.
Well, every year, about 400,000 babies are born in Texas. Now, before they're discharged from the hospital, they leave something behind for the state. A sample of their DNA. Now, the blood spots are used to screen for a list of life-threatening diseases. Now, this is a copy of a blood spot. Now, while in the hospital, the baby's heel will be pricked and 5 drops of blood are collected. A couple weeks later, another 5 drops of blood are taken at the pediatrician's office and sent to the state. Now, the newborn screening process only used 1 or 2 of the spots. So what happens to the remaining samples? Well, the state keeps them. The problem? They've been doing it for years, unbeknownst to parents.
Dr. Frederic Whitehurst was an FBI agent at the Washington Bureau's crime lab from the 1980s until 1998. He blew the whistle on the sloppy practices of agents in the lab, including deliberately altered reports that were used in criminal cases. Although he has first-hand knowledge of the ways in which law enforcement authorities can wrongly convict people by forensic tampering, he is hopeful that the internet will help to ensure that this tampering will not go unnoticed or unpunished by the public in the future. Earlier this year, he appeared on The Alex Jones Show to discuss these topics.
Well, you were talking about are things getting worse or getting better, and I think they're getting a lot better. I think because we have instantaneous knowledge now. We're connected through the internet, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. And we can research on our own from our living rooms, our bedrooms, our offices, even our cars. We can be at the beach and find out that, for instance, an article just came out while I was waiting for this show here. The Nebraska CSI chief has been found guilty of planting evidence. We know about those things now, and that's really healthy. When the government controls the knowledge base, then that becomes dangerous because their inferences may not be proper inferences. We, as a people, govern this nation. That's what our goal is. It may at times we vary from it, but sir, I think that with instantaneous knowledge, then we all can take part in juries. We can all take part in who we elect. We can say, I'm not sure about this. About 3 weeks ago, had a guy in North Carolina before the North Carolina Innocence Commission. His name's Dwayne Deaver. Told them 18 years ago during trial of this man who was before the commission, there were two tests that decided whether there was blood in the evidence, and one of them said yes, and the other one said no, and he only reported the yes. And it has shaken up this state to think that a man in our crime laboratory, a lowly state employee, can put a guy in jail forever. He just unilaterally decide, well, I'm not going to report the stuff that would hurt the prosecutor's case. We found that out instantaneously. This wasn't in some court 500 miles from you or whatever. It's all over the news, all over the place. And so I think it's really, things are getting better.
In other news, the 16th annual conference of the parties wrapped up in Cancun, Mexico this weekend with a non-binding agreement to continue talking about a climate change agreement next year. The UN-led group created a meaningless agreement of vague and scientifically unsound promises to keep future supposed warming under 2 degrees Celsius by reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80 to 95% by 2050. The text, being non-binding, is looked upon as meaningless, but did include a provision for the long-sought goal of creating a so-called Green Climate Fund, administered by the UN COP agency, of $100 billion a year annually by 2020 from the developed nations. No provisions were included to suggest how this money will be collected, but many observers are noting that this represents the first truly global governmental agency and the first step on the path to the creation of the first global tax. These fears were confirmed earlier this year by UN IPCC official Ottmar Edenhofer, who confirmed that the global climate talks are not about science, but about redistributing the world's wealth. Basically, it's a big mistake to discuss climate policy separately from the major themes of globalization. The climate summit in Cancun at the end of the month is not a climate conference, but one of the largest economic conferences since the Second World War, he told Germany's NZZ Online Sunday last month. One must say clearly that we redistribute de facto the world's wealth by climate policy. Dr. Tim Ball appeared on the Corbett Report earlier this week to discuss the true nature of the Cancun summit and the UN's interest in climate.
Well, I think that the pressure to keep the CO2 thing going is very high. Because, of course, there are people that made political careers on it, but there's also academics that have made academic careers on it. But more importantly, the huge amounts, and I'm talking into the hundreds of millions of dollars of funding going to the research and into corporations that have been set up around tax breaks on alternate energies and all of these other things. And so you built up such a huge part of the economy around the alternate energy and the so-called green jobs and so on, that it's going to take some time, because there will be considerable resistance, even though people will say, well, yeah, okay, so the science is all phony, so what? We're making money off of this, and that's what's important. So I think that it will gradually die, but it's going to take some time. And then, of course, what we've got to do is put in place alternate policies to deal with the lack of energy that's required, that's going to be needed.
Finally this week, official word has come that Congressman Ron Paul will be the chair of the House Subcommittee on Monetary Policy in the new Congress, meaning that he will be the one in charge of monitoring the very Federal Reserve that he seeks to abolish.
Congressman, what is your first action going to be?
Well, we'll probably think things through and not overdo things too soon. Well, the new session hasn't started yet. Yes, I'll have plans for hearings to find out how much information we can get. Obviously, it's very popular with the American people to audit the Fed, to know what they're doing. When they can spend trillions of dollars and we don't know where it goes, they have a bigger budget. They spend more money than the Congress does, and yet we have no oversight. It was never intended that a secret body like this could create money out of thin air and spend it, take care of some banks and big business and foreign banks,
right?
And the American people struggle. I mean, we have to look into it, and we have to start to consider reforms.
Now please go to CorbettReport.com to download episode 165 of the Corbett Report podcast, How to Talk to Others, as we listen to examples of how to talk to people who disagree from Richard Andrew Grove, Charlie Veach, Alex Jones, and We Are Change.